All right, so in this session, it's going to be a little bit different. We're going to be talking about a tool that we use for assessment in our classrooms, and it's something that has really evolved over the years. So if you've ever been to a Joyful Literacy summit before or a small workshop, you've probably heard of the circle charts. This is something that Janet began, more than 10 years ago now, paper circle charts to assess and track students' skills for the foundational skills. The circle charts were amazing on paper, but they were a little bit cumbersome, and it was a little bit difficult to really be efficient with them and use them for our planning. Janet then, about a year and a half ago now, teamed up with Sprig Reading, it's a company in Ontario, to do this online, to do it as an app, and it is really, really amazing. It has become just so efficient. We've used it so much, and we want to go through it today with you to show you how we use it in the classroom. So we are going to start by simply showing you some of the benefits of the app and how we use it. Then we'll take some time going through the app and showing you how it all works online. And then we're going to talk at the end about a planning tool, which is in the handouts online, a planning tool that you can use, whether you're using the app or not, to plan for your students after you've done your assessments with them. So let's get into it.
Perfect. So what we're going to do is we're going to walk through just a series of questions that we can then show you what that would look like in the app. And as Chelsea mentioned, afterwards, we'll go through the app itself and kind of teach you a little bit about navigating that, if that's something you would be interested in your own classrooms. So question one, what if you could look at an individual letter assessment, and immediately group students based on your needs? The app can do that for you. Oh, a little too far. There you go. So what this is a circle chart. So we've picked a letter, the uppercase letter G, and this is a quick snapshot of my entire class, showing you which students have mastered that skill, which students need a little bit more support with that skill, and which students need quite a bit more explicit teaching. If you're not familiar with circle charts, just to show you, the black circles represented here would be students that have completely mastered it. Also, the app gives you the option of having a half circle, which means that the student is working towards mastery, but needs a little bit more support, some extra doses with that. And the white circles are students that are going to be more concerning as far as just needing a little bit more explicit teaching to get going on that.
So this is one way to show grouping, and we'll talk about grouping in a moment, but just going into what does that mean they've mastered this skill? So circle charts, and in the app as well, there's an explanation to that. We want them to be able to do more than just say the letter. So if we give them the uppercase letter G, we want them to be able to say the letter, of course, and recognize it, but we also want them to be able to say the letter sound that goes with it. We want them to be able to say at least the most common letter sound, and eventually more than one. So if it's the G, we want them to be able to say the G sound and eventually the J sound, but G is perfect to begin with. We also want them to be able to find that letter in a book or in context, and we want them to be able to build that letter with Play-Doh or anything like that. They don't need to be printing it because that's a different skill, but we want them to be able to form the letter.
As we talked about with our fluency, if you were able to join us for our session earlier today, you could find that letter within a poem, find that letter within on the chart paper or within a book that you're reading. That would count towards that skill as well. So if you're looking at the half circles, for example, Kelly, she might know the letter sound, but maybe not be able to name the letter, or vice versa, or there's some part of that she might be missing, and that's why it's represented by the half circle. So at a quick glance here, this is really, really useful for when we talk about the weekly planning tool later, is at first glance, I can see, okay, I have 3 students here that need quite a bit more explicit teaching. We're going to be talking about how you're able to maybe pull those students out, do a little bit a side group during some part of the day to be able to work with those 3 students. There is a handful of students here that might need just a little bit of extra doses. So as I'm planning our practice centers for that week, I might be pulling out the uppercase letter G as part of one of those practice centers, just for a little bit of extra doses, because I would say a good chunk of the class here needs a little bit more support with that letter.
All right, so let's move into another question. What if you could confidently show parents every foundational skill their child has learned and has yet to learn? Let's take a look at this little video here.
So within the app here, you have this as one of your pages, and you can scroll down and go through and it lists every skill that you've been practicing. You'll notice that there's a lot of zeros right now. So some of the skills you have yet to teach, and it will show you that too. On the far right, the skills not yet assessed. It will give you a percentage. So if it's 100% that we have not assessed them yet, then we don't need to worry so much about those 0% on the other side.
So this is really, really cool. We have every foundational skill in the app that you can be assessing. Now, of course, it would be extremely overwhelming if you were to take a kindergarten class, for example, and do every one of these foundational skills. That is not the expectation. In kindergarten, we generally want to be assessing the alphabet skills right away out of the gate. We want to be working on phonological awareness skills, and then we want to be going into sight words and with that phonemic awareness. So this looks maybe a little overwhelming at first, but we don't need to be going through every piece. What's really, really cool though, is that we can assess our students and then we can go into a print report for individual skills and we can have this ready to go at parent conferences. It is all printable. So we can look over on the right-hand side, and this would be our phonological awareness skills. And these ones are at the K level. So some of them are grayed out. Some of them we have not yet assessed. That's because they're just a higher level. They might be a grade 1, 2 level, or maybe we just haven't got to it yet with our kiddos. But we can see here the ones that we have assessed. This student, they're blending syllables. They understand deleting compound words and discriminating between rhyming and non-rhyming words. But I can tell here that they're struggling with the isolation of the initial letters, as well as producing words that rhyme. So if I have this out for parents at conferences, I can talk to them about those skills. I can even have a little game ready to go to hand to them, and maybe a simple game like the fishing games we saw earlier in our presentations. Something easy that they can take home and work on that skill. But we're able to do this without showing them all of the other students. And we're also able to do this without going through binders and binders and binders of individual paper assessments.
The power of making this individualized is fantastic. As Chelsea mentioned, before the app, when I would use my old circle chart, which was a great tool, the problem was that when I want to show that or share that with parents, I would have to take a bunch of paper, sticky notes, and cover up the other names for privacy so that they're not seeing the rest of the class. With this, you can, when you print it off, it is just that student. It's very individualized. And then to talk about those games sending home, this is a skill that your child needs to work on. This is a game that you can do at home that's really fun and engaging because we love to involve our parents, and then send that off. And that is absolutely perfect. And it could be different for every child. You have your kind of bank of games, of tools, of strategies that you would use. And then you can choose which student needs that one at home at that time. And you might have a student that needs support with a lot of skills. I wouldn't be saying, okay, your child needs to do all this game, and overwhelm the parents, because then we know it's not going to happen at home. But pick 1 or 2 of those skills. Say, let's make this the focus right now. Let's get improvement in this for this skill, and then we'll move on. Same with letters. Sometimes you send home that letter assessment and they're all white circles. And as a parent, that can be very, very overwhelming. So I'll highlight some of those and say, okay, let's work on this, and this letter right now. Once they've mastered that, then we slowly add more letters to that. So explaining that to parents too, so they're not overwhelming the child by saying, oh, we need all 26 letters right now. Let's start with the letters in their name. Let's move on from that as an example.
Absolutely. Good point. And also, not just for parents, but communicating this with our other support teachers. So we have in Canada, if you're in Canada, we have learning support teachers. We have various support people that we can give information to. Oftentimes we're going, oh, well, if I look at my paper binder, I go through the alphabet, I have it pencil marked everywhere, and that's one individual student. Well, in the previous slides, you saw that we quickly grouped people together. So we can either send off some names with the skills that they need to work on to these support teachers. Or if we're looking at an individual student, we can print off a report and say, look, this is the evidence. This student needs support. There's obviously something going on. We're seeing a trend. Maybe it's something more. Maybe it's hearing. Maybe it's vision. But this is the evidence that you need to go and get those extra supports. So if you have school-based team meetings in your school, this is what you would want to be taking with you. But it's so much easier than rifling through all of those different things.
Next question. What if you could click a button and have activities or practice centers ready to print for each skill? Well, within the app, if you click on, we'll show you this when we get to the app in a moment, but there's a resource tab on the left-hand side, and there are tons of resources in there right now ready for you to print. It's a fantastic tool. It takes the thinking out of trying to find activities and games sometimes. when they're right there, easy click, easy spot to find. It makes our lives as teachers so much easier to have things ready to go. We don't have to be going and searching for hours trying to find activities to fit with these different skills.
But also when you're talking to those parents and you have, okay, here we are, we have exactly the syllables that they need to work on, come on here, print it off, and it's all in one spot. So that's really, really handy too. Now, this is something that is building currently. So they have a few activities in there. They've got lots of resources, but they're working on adding more and more activities, and they love to hear from teachers. So we've been giving our ideas to the Sprig app, and you are welcome to share yours as well. What if you could glance at a one-page sheet and know how your whole class is doing with a skill? This is one of my favorite parts of the circle charts, and it came with the paper circle charts as well, is that we can see our entire class on one page. It looks like this. Now, at first, that might look a little bit overwhelming, but as soon as you start to understand the circles, this visual tool is so powerful. I can see that I have all my kiddos on the left-hand side, and then I have all the skills on the top. So this sheet happens to be sight words. And I'm able to, at a very quick glance, see that the word can is a word that the whole class knows very, very well. So if I'm thinking of my planning, which we'll get into later, can is not a word that I would go back to in explicit teaching. Of course, it's a word that would be in practice centers, and it would be in our reading and our shared reading and our poetry, but it's not a skill that I need to explicitly teach at the carpet again. But if I go further, there's other words that are obvious that we need to work on. And I'm looking vertically down and I can see all the white circles. So those would be words that I would want to refocus on and explicitly teach at the carpet. I could also look down the side and see individual students. So what if we could go deeper and highlight the skills that need work for the whole class, or individual students who need practice? Well, we can do that right there.
Yeah, and this is what we used to do with our paper circle charts. We would sit down at the end of the week as we're trying to plan for our next week, and we would take our highlighters out and we would highlight the paper charts. We would write little notes all over them. The problem with that is then you can't go back. With a circle chart, you can highlight directly on it now. That's a new function that they've added recently. You can highlight both columns or rows. So I can be looking at Charlie here. We've highlighted Charlie because she's missing a lot of skills there, something that we need to work on. Maybe that's this data that you're taking to your admin or to your school-based team, saying, hey, we could use some extra support here. This is what we're seeing in the classroom right now. You could print that. Then you could go back the next week, and if you don't want all your markings up, maybe you marked it all up at the end of that week after you've printed it. The next week, you could take those highlighting marks out and you could start all over. It's nice and fresh. So the chance to be able to go back and forth is quite useful. But this is really, really, really the power of the circle chart, to be able to see at a glance, this is where I'm going to need support. This is how I'm going to group these students. This is the letter, the sight word that I need to go back next week and spend some more time on. It's very easy for us to move forward. Oh, we've taught that sight word. I got to get to the next sight word. But with this data, constantly referring back to the data, you need to make sure you're slowing down where you need to slow down, move a little bit faster when you need to move faster. Just always remembering that the circle charts are there. We're constantly referring back to them. Assessments are kind of on the go. So it's not once a reporting term that we're doing this. This is something that we're using as a tool weekly.
I think that's the big shift, is that, originally we give the year plan to our principals and we think that, we've got to hit these words every week and we have to keep to the plan. That's not really how our students learn. I mean, ideally, yes, of course, we're following as much as we can, but we're really going off of what our students are learning and keeping it up to date all the time. So looking at this chart, down, find, and funny are clearly words that our class is struggling with as a whole. So I want to take those words and I want to revisit them at the carpet with explicit instruction. So we might be doing things that are, kinesthetic learning. We might be feeling the word. We might be writing it on whiteboard markers. We might be getting up and moving with it. Maybe we're adding it to our weekly poetry and our songs, but we're obviously planning for the words that need explicit instruction. Looking at those individual students is another whole story. That's where we're doing our small groups and we're making our practice centers individual to them.
And looking at those words, those 3 words that need some extra support, that just fully immersing them in it, putting it up on the door. So as they're heading out for recess, they're giving it a high five and saying the word, using it in a sentence. Maybe as they're washing their hands, you have it posted by the sink. Looking at that, you can say, okay, I'm going to put this word up for this week as many times as we can. I've used things. We've found this little template of a paper watch online. I'll give a kiddo a paper watch. We'll have that word on there and ask, hey, what time is it? They'll look at their watch and say the sight word. Just little fun little ways that you can incorporate that, but knowing always that looking at your assessments, this is where the need is. Let's find those little tiny ways that we can add that to our daily routine in the classroom.
I just had a new thought. This is what Nathan and I do all the time. We're talking, we're at Protees, and all of a sudden a thought will come into our head for our own classrooms. Here's my thought. You have a movable board on your door or on your window or wherever you are that they can access before they leave, and they have to do the sound boxes for the sight word before they go.
Amazing.
So you could have magnet letters on there, and they have to stick them in the sound boxes just for the individual word that they're working on.
Fantastic.
That would be really cool. I'm going to have to try that.
So many different ideas. Chelsea and I found there's a free template online of a Canadian passport, which we absolutely love. It looks very official. It looks like a passport. We took it down to a print shop, made a copy for all of our students, and we've individually put sight words or letters, whatever the student's working on a page of the passport. So, but 4 sight words on a page. That student's going to work on those words. So this is based on our assessments. Once they've mastered that, they've got it 10, 15 times. We give the little check marks. We stamp it with our little maple leaf. They flip the page. Now we added 4 new sight words. They absolutely love it. And every time they traveled into school, okay, we're heading down to the gym. We have to make sure we're carrying our passports because we're traveling. And other teachers or admin would stop them in the hallway. Can I see your passport, please? They'd have to list off their 4 words, get the little check marks, and off they go. Just a fun way to add in a little bit more of those doses because we're looking at those charts and realizing that, okay, they need some extra support. Let's get it done. So what if you could have a quick refresher on instructional strategies and assessment strategies for each foundational skill? We know that lives get busy. We understand that in the moment, we forget things. There's an option on the app to look back and get just a really quick reminder. Okay, here are some instructional strategies for teaching our rhyming or teaching this skill. It's really, really handy when our brains are full of a million things that come our way every day, as we know in any classroom. This is just a quick little support to help us kind of reset our brains and then be able to teach that strategy, teach that skill.
And it goes with our instruction. So each of the foundational skills has some instructional strategies as well as assessment strategies. So it's important if you're looking at your assessments, say across your kindergarten classes, that we want to be able to compare and support each other, and having some assessment strategies that are similar and across the board is really, really helpful. So we all use the same assessment strategies for our K groups, and then we understand, okay, this is where they're at, this is the sports we can have, and we do a lot of collaboration. So we will look at each other's circle charts and we will say, okay, you had Charlie and George who really needed this. I have Kelly and Adam who also really need that same skill. Can we combine? Let's figure that out. Let's work together to get that into a small group. So maybe I'm taking some of Nathan's kiddos in my class and I'm doing a read aloud or some shared reading, and Nathan's taking some small groups and doing a little bit of a blitz or a practice center with those skills that we need. So really keeping assessments straight kind of across your grade groupings can be really, really helpful.
And that's just taking to the next level. If you can have a school community that's supporting the individual needs of students by combining different classrooms and doing whatever you need to do to make that work, that's when things are really efficiently run and can be very, very valuable. So instead of teaching within our own 4 walls of our classrooms, that we are constantly collaborating with each other and pairing students based on their needs.
So this was all kind of a show of the Sprig Reading app. So it is on Sprig Learning. Sprig Learning has a variety of things. They've got math and reading and all of that. This is the Sprig Reading app, and it's all inspired by Janet Mort's circle charts. And the circle charts are something that really I've used since I started teaching. So I've been using them now 8 years, I guess. 8, 9 years, that's crazy. I started with Janet pretty much right out of the gate. And it has been amazing, because when I was going through the teacher programs, all I saw were these binders of all these assessments, and I couldn't compare one student to the other without flipping all the way through. And it wasn't visual for me, and I'm a very visual learner. So the circle charts were such a positive for me in the beginning. Now being able to do it on the computer or on the phone and being able to manipulate and see the highlighting and being able to group my students by clicking a button and having some resources there, it's just become kind of a one-stop shop for me, which I'm really, really appreciative because lives are so busy.
And the circles, speaking of visual, it's visual for us, it's visual for our students
Yeah.
too. We have students that understand the way the circle chart works and they want to see their circles colored in. And it almost becomes a little bit of a competition. How many circles did you get colored in today? And then it just adds that little bit of learning and just a little bit of pride too when they see those circles starting to be colored in as the year progresses. It's quite exciting.
So what we'd like to do now is come out of our presentation and we want to go into the app page to show you what it actually looks like all together. We'll spend a little bit of time in there, but then we want to go into what you have in your handouts on the website, which is the weekly planning tool. And this can be done, like we said, with or without the circle charts. The circle charts just make it that much more efficient and easier to look at. But I'll come out of here and I will reshare my screen. So bear with me for a moment. And there we go. So this is what it looks like when you go into the app. We're going to go into a demo class here. And it'll pop up and it's going to show you all of those foundational skills. So we gave you some screenshots of individual skills. We showed you some phonological awareness and we showed you some alphabet. But all of the foundational skills are here and each one of them is very, very similar. So they have the same look about them as you go in. So we will go into just one of them. I just wanted to show you them.
And if you look on the left side too, this is your navigational bar. So we'll talk a little bit more about where you find those resources. There's training videos at the bottom. You can access all your circle charts too. Once you leave this current screen to get back to them, you just click on those circle charts and it'll take you back to where you are, what you're seeing right now. But that's where you do most of your navigation is on that sidebar there.
So I'm going to go into our phonics and alphabet knowledge here. It's going to sign me up and sign me back in. All right. So as we come into here, you're going to see what it looks like, and it'll be, again, the same for every skill. So I'm going to go into uppercase letters here. It is done by alphabet. So lowercase, uppercase, and vowels are separate. And it looks like this. I've got all my students on one side. I've got all those skills on the top. Just like we showed you at the beginning, if you click any letter, you're going to get all of those students up in one go. So you can see all the uppercase letter F, and really only Anita and Haley here need some work. So I can easily go pull those for a small group at the back. At the top, you have the instructional strategies that we discussed. You've got your activities, resources for alphabet, as well as the assessment strategies. If you click this legend here, it just gives you an idea again of what those circles mean. So gray, you haven't assessed them. A full white circle, they need explicit instruction. A half circle would be they need more practice for something. And then a full circle, they've mastered it.
The first thing I noticed here too, when we looked at this circle chart, was that there was that kind of purple circle, and we hadn't talked about the colors. The colors represent different times of the year. And this is a really, really neat function because at one part of the year, there'll be a certain color and you can see the growth over the course of the year based on the colors of the circle. So purple in this case is September to November. There'll be different colors. This is, again, is a new feature. So they've changed it from the black circles to these color circles just recently. So now you'll be able to change those throughout the course of the year, and that kind of automatically changes the color. And then when you're showing that to parents too, it'll show kind of that, just be able to demonstrate that growth at this time. So some students will, have a very slow start and then something clicks by May, and now they're getting a whole bunch. You'll see kind of a big jump later in the year for your orange kind of color there.
I don't like this keyboard. All right, I wanted to show you this feature. This is really, really cool. So we've been working with the app and with circle charts for a long time. And one of the things that we wanted was to be able to say, well, if it's a half circle, what does that mean? I mean, I can tell that they need more practice, but what do they need more practice with? Is it with the sound? Is it with the recognition? Is it with finding it in context or being able to build it? You're also able to do, so if I hover over one of the letters, this is J, I have all the options for the circles, but I also have a comment option. And that's what I was just showing you there, is that you're able to put in any kind of comment you want on that particular assessment.
So you could say, oh, Charlie knows the letter name for H, but doesn't know the sound. So that would be a comment. easy for you to refer to back later as you're printing off your circle charts.
And it also is going to date stamp anytime you change the assessment. So you are able to kind of track when you did your last assessment as you're looking through. Let's go to the print report, because this is what we showed you when you got to see all the class at once. We just want to show you another feature in there as well. When you're in the print report, if you wanted to go to a different skill, all you had to do was drop down. You could pick any skill and the print report would come up right away. So you don't have to go in and out as you're printing. This is where you're able to do your highlighting, choosing your colors to highlight either vertically or horizontally. And this is where you get to choose where you want to print. So is it right now that you want to print from, or is it a document from 2 weeks ago that you want to print that you didn't get to talk to a student about, or you want to show a parent the progress they've made from one time to another? You're able to print from any time. You just go back in the calendar.
Fantastic tool for collaborating with your school too, taking this to admin. I can go back and print what we were doing in September compared to what January looks like. They can right away visually see that growth over time, or lack of, depending on which student. It's really, really useful to be able to go back and see the historical circle charts throughout the year.
So what we'll do is we'll finish up with just showing you where you find that student data. The other thing that you're able to do, if you just notice the teachers here, you are able to have more than one teacher involved. So if you have a TA or a support worker or an LST teacher that you want involved as well, you can add them in and they'll be able to see all the data, which means they will be able to do some grouping as well, which is really, really beneficial. So here you have all of your students all at once. If you ever want to see one student at a time, you just click on their name. An overview of skills will come up and you're able to go into each individual skill and do a print report like we showed you in the presentation.
That's where you can share with parents the individual skills that student's been working on, or share with your school team.
So what we want to do is take a little pause, because that was a lot of information at one time, a lot of moving of the screen. As we're moving away from this and going into our weekly planning tool, if you have any questions about the app or something that you wanted to see, simply put it into the chat. We'll take a look as we move on. So we'll give you a couple minutes to do that as we get our planning tool ready to go.
This is a neat opportunity too to share ideas of things that you wish the app could do that maybe we haven't talked about today too. The team working behind the app has been very responsive to suggestions that we've had. We're always adding new things for them, saying, hey, it'd be really neat if the app could do this. And then within a certain amount of time, they've been able to add a lot of those suggestions into the app. So this is the opportunity too to make it work for classroom teachers, for the real classroom, because we all know how busy we get. We want this to be as easy as possible when using it in our rooms.
Absolutely. All right, so we're going to go into the handout that we added to the website. So you should be able to see it there. This has been a big change for us over the last, I would say, year. We were doing a lot of our own analysis of our circle charts, our paper circle charts. We would take them and look at them at the end of the week and look at how our assessments were doing, and we kind of plan for the week. But it wasn't consistent. And I have to admit, I didn't do a great job of planning my practice centers or my groups or anything like that. I was looking roughly and thinking, okay, I have an idea of who I want to see and what skills we need to work on. But we really need to be intentional, because that is where we're going to make the moves for those students who are struggling, especially those students who are dyslexic or have an issue learning like that. They are able to learn to read. We need to figure out how. And how is by doing our foundational skills, our fluency, our reading, our read alouds and our shared reading, and all of those different pieces put together. But we have to know what we're doing, and that's where the analysis comes in. So this is our data analysis strategy paper, and Janet Mort has really created this, and she's done a fantastic job. So we won't go through every piece of this, because you have it, you're able to read through, but we want to show you how we do our assessments, and we'll pop back and forth between the app and our circle charts and this paper.
It's important at the end of the week that we always print out our circle charts as a starting point to make sure we have that in collaboration with this tool, so we can start making those connections and being able to plan for the next week.
So as we're doing our assessments, we have a lot of questions about, well, how much do you assess? When do you do your assessments? How do you find time? If we go back to the beginning of the year, say we have a kindergarten class, which is what we do, we are not sitting down all of our kindergarten students and going through all of the skills and assessing all of it. It's just not going to happen. They are like squirrels. Their attention is like 5 seconds at that point. So what we're going to do is we're going to focus on the alphabet and then move on to some of the other skills like phonological awareness. Phonological awareness is not really something that you need to assess daily. It's going to be something that you're going to assess daily and then plan your instruction for. You're going to have a plan of what phonological awareness skills you're working on as a class, and then do your assessment maybe 3 times a year to see how they're improving with it, because it's not something that's going to change within 2 days. They're going to need a lot of oral practice with their phonological awareness skills. So that's a little bit different. If we're looking at the alphabet, when we first start in kindergarten, I want to assess as I teach the skills. So if I've done 3 letters this week, on Friday, I want to have assessed a number of my students on those 3 letters. I may not get to all of them, but I'm going to have that noted in my circle charts of who I need to check in with on the next week.
And then when we're doing assessments too, we understand that students don't have a long attention span, like Chelsea mentioned. So as I'm pulling them, we're keeping those students doing a couple letters, get off you go. So they're only with you for 30 seconds, maybe at a time, and then they're gone, maybe a little bit longer, depending on your students. But we'll never keep them for a long time and going on. Sometimes you'll have students that you'll assess a few letters and they go, but I know these letters too. And then you go, okay, well, let's keep going. And then you do end up going through the whole alphabet just because they're that interested in it. But typically you're pulling students maybe during your center time. They want to go back and play centers. You understand that you're not going to keep them too long, and off they go.
And there's a variety of ways that you could do this. So it mentions this in a few different places in this pamphlet, but I'm not going to go over all of it. But you can print out assessments and have it in a clipboard and write it as you go around. If they're doing their practice centers, you notice that Jimmy's able to do the letter J. J says J. He understands that he can come up with a word that starts with J, put it in a sentence if it's a sight word, etc. You can have that on a little chart paper or a little clipboard, and then you can go back to the app or go back to your circle charts and fill in the circles later. That's a definite possibility. Lots of teachers like to do it right on the circles. So if they have their computer, their iPad, they're able to walk around, they're able to click the circles, or they're able to do it by pulling kids into a back table and having the computer right there. So there's lots of different ways you can do your assessments. That's really based on teacher preference. But you can take individual students, you can do it as they're doing the practice centers, and you can even go outside when they're playing on the playground and pull students for individual assessments. So whatever you are comfortable with.
And then we all know that we have those students that might know a letter one day and then another day they don't. What that means is it just hasn't been put into their long-term memory yet. So with a circle chart, even if a circle is full, you can go back and change it to a half circle or a blank circle, whatever you need to do. It's always changeable no matter what state that circle's in.
And it's great that you're able to then see the changes, because if you are clicking and you decide, you know what, that student really doesn't know it, let's do a half circle, you can go back and see if that's a trend. Because are they constantly getting switched back and forth? I can go into the calendar and see a month ago, 2 months ago, and notice if this is a trend where it's not staying in their long-term memory. Well, then we need to be doing something different with that student. We need to be approaching it in a different way.
The other thing with the circle chart too is that it is a lot of work at the beginning to start getting those circles filled in. Once they are filled in, it's very, very easy to go back and, okay, I've got a couple blank circles here. Let's go assess that student. Off they go really quick. It's a lot less cumbersome as you've used it a little bit longer. But to start off getting that data imported in right away takes a little bit of time. Especially if you're in grade 1 and grade 2 and you're starting, and this is the first time you're using it, to get that data up to date takes a little bit of time, but the data can then be transferred to the next year's teacher as well, which means that it's already done. And all they have to do is get caught up with those gaps that they're missing. Which
is huge. That's a huge, huge thing. All right, so let's dive into weekly planning instruction. So you've done all your assessments, you've walked around, you've collected it all, it's in your circle chart or in your assessment, however you've done it. Now, what do we do? So we look at it either Friday after school or on the weekend, and we sit down and we plan. So we need the summaries of our assessments. So if you have the app, great, you're looking at that. You might print them out and keep them together so you can see all of them in one place. I kind of like to have them printed, but if you've already had them highlighted, that's fantastic because you're able to see what students need individual work and what, let's say it's letters, what letters you need to do for explicit instruction at the carpet. So you're going to take all of that with you, sit down with a mug of coffee or a glass of wine, and do your planning.
Whatever you prefer. All right, so then as you're doing your planning, what you're looking for is you're looking for those gaps. You're looking for those skills that you need to focus on for the next week. And that's where that highlighting, either directly on the app or using your own highlighters on a paper version once it's been printed, that's where that really comes into play. So you're finding those gaps, and that's where that's driving what your focus is going to be, whether that's going to be more explicit teaching, whether that's going to be, okay, I'm now designing my practice centers to just add a little bit more doses for that letter, for that sight word, whatever the skill is.
So I'm going to go down. These are just some examples, again, of how you can do this, printing it, using it in a clipboard, etc. But let's look at the actual weekly planning. So this is something that you can print out every week. You can keep them in a nice binder together or on a clipboard on the wall, and you're going to be able to make your groups. So we can actually go back and forth and look at our circle charts as we do this and plan with you. So the first one is identify the skills that many children don't know. Choose and list the skills you will teach each week in either the whole group or in small groups. Well, if we go back to our circle charts, we're going to stick with the alphabet right now, but again, you could do this for any of your skills. And we'll go back into the uppercase.
All right, so looking at the uppercase letters here, we're going to first, what I would do is look down those columns, looking for the lots of white circles or half circles. Go into our print view here to be able to see that a little bit better as a whole group. And here we are. So we'll take our highlighters out. Right now, if I was to glance at this quickly, I'm looking at the letter G as an option. I see quite a few white circles on the uppercase G. Later on the alphabet, we have the letter, looks like the letter U there. That would be one that I would highlight. Okay, we need a bit more work there. W could use some work, and looks like Y for sure. Those at first glance to me, I see quite a few white circles there. Those are the ones that we've highlighted. Okay, let's spend a little bit more time planning our instruction for those 4 letters for this coming week. So that's what we would put into that first section there as kind of a whole group. You could also talk, there's also the option to talk about the small groups there too, which is maybe pulling out, just if you notice that there's 3 students that don't know this letter, then we can maybe do a little small pull-out group. And I've got a game ready that we can do with that, with those 3 students.
Okay, and skills that have been taught but need to be retaught. So maybe you've done 3 letters this week, you've done your assessments. Most of the kiddos have figured it out, but you need to review that with them. So it's nice to be able to see exactly what you've taught this week and review that the following week, along with continuing to go on with the letters or sight words that you're teaching. This is where you're going to say, okay, which days, looking at my schedule of the week, where can I actually fit this in? Because it's great to know the kiddos that need support or the skill that you're going to do as a whole group. But when during the day are you actually going to be able to do it? That's a big key, because we can think about it and not plan directly, and then we'll run out of time. We have other things going on and it doesn't get done. So really thinking about where can I fit that in and getting creative. Maybe the extra doses, if you're looking at that whole group, let's go back. We know that they need work on the letter Q. So you could have Q posted all over your classroom. And, you might be doing a math lesson, you're doing addition or anything like that at the carpet, or they're at their tables and all of a sudden you stop. Q time. Everyone runs and they go slap a Q. And what does that sound? They say the sound. Can you come up with a word that starts with Q, et cetera, et cetera? It can be any letter. But doing something like that is going to bring some joy into it. It's breaking up the day. It's getting them moving, but it's actually getting an extra dose of that word or that letter or that skill that they need practice with.
I was going to mention it's that body break right there too, which we need to be incorporating anyways. Why not do a little bit of that extra practice in that body break?
So writing that down, right? Body break ideas with the word come, anything like that you can think of when you're going to fit it in your day.
And it doesn't take long. It doesn't need to take long, but it does need to be a priority. And if it's not a priority, if you're like me and your to-do list continues to grow and you're not checking many things off of it, it's easy to put things on the back shelf, thinking that you're going to get to it tomorrow. But if that's our mindset, then we're going to keep pushing it, and it doesn't become a major part of our teaching, and it needs to be.
So we'll go to identify the skills that need small group instruction. So these blue ones are definitely ones that need whole group instruction. There's lots of full blank circles, lots of half circles, but there's also some different vertical ones that have, a handful. So I can change the color. Let's go with red this time. And I'm going to notice that, let's see, J, there's a number with J, not quite as much as the other ones, but there's a number. Looks like N needs some work for a few of them. You can go over V. V needs quite a bit of work, probably for the sounds. And now I'm able to pull those students. I can say, okay, you know what?
We could look at, I would say, Haley and Lincoln here for sure. They both need the letter J and the letter N and some more work, letter V. So those two right away, maybe even throwing in Colin right underneath them as well. Those students, we could maybe pull those 3 letters, make a little game, because they all 3 of them need some work on that. So trying to find those parts of the circle chart that are going to connect. So these students have the same circles that they're missing a little bit in. Now we can create that little group.
And now I'm going to write that in here. And again, just to say, of course, we are talking about circle charts. That's what we're using. You can absolutely use any form of assessment. The point is that you have the evidence in the assessments, you've tracked them, and now you're planning. So use whatever you have and then plan these same groups. Plan your small group instruction, plan your full group instruction, plan the times that you're going to do it, regardless of how you're assessing.
The key is that our assessment drives our instruction. And whatever form that looks like for you is whatever works for you. But we need to make sure that our instruction is explicit based on our assessments.
So which children am I worried about? Who will I design time to meet privately with to either reassure myself or prepare a special intervention? So this is where we're looking at those individual students. And I'm going to choose a different highlighter color here. Let's say yellow. And I'm going to go down now. Charlie is definitely one that I'm having some big flags with. There is clearly something going on. He only knows a couple of his letters, maybe just his letter sounds. He's missing a lot. I wonder if it might be something to do with his hearing. Haley down here, also another student that I can see across the board is having some difficulties. Lincoln as well. And you can see that now we're able to start having conversations and tell stories about these students, because you know what? Maybe it's that they've had a really tough time at home. Something's gone on at home and they just haven't been there mentally. Well, that's a story that we need to be telling, different from a student who is just not getting it. They're there, they're excited, but they're just not getting it. Well, now we need to look at some different interventions.
Yeah. So as a teacher, you understand the backstory of your circle charts, which someone else who's looking at it might not understand. So it's important that when you're meeting with your team, that you're communicating that. It could be that maybe Lincoln has missed a lot of school, and that might be the reason he's a little bit behind. He's got a lot of half circles. He's coming, but without being in the building as much as you would like him, that might be where those gaps are. So understand your story so that when you communicate, there's always a little bit of an explanation. So the more information we can provide for our school-based teams, the more that we can design support that's going to be efficient and effective.
Absolutely. All right. So which skills need so much practice by so many children? I will create practice centers to give them lots of doses. So that again would be the ones that we did in blue at the beginning, that Q, that W, those ones there. Those are the ones that you want to add to your practice centers. So what we would do is if we're teaching a few letters a week, we would want to be teaching those letters explicitly at the carpet, adding those into our practice centers. And then if there's more from the week before that they're not getting, well, guess what? We need to go back to that. We need to do some explicit instruction as well with those letters. So we might be pausing on our plan of the letters that we're reviewing that weekly. Then we add all of our practice centers in and reassess.
Something that I like to do in my classroom too is early in the year, I have my schedule, which letters I would like to start teaching. But I always leave a little bit of flex time. So after a couple of weeks, we have, okay, let's review. And that's when you're looking at those circle charts saying, okay, they've got this letter, but they're missing this one and this one and this one. We're going to spend more time just on those 3. before we start introducing anything new. So giving yourself that a little bit of flexibility. And again, as we mentioned, if things aren't working, you don't have to follow that schedule that you thought you were going to follow at the beginning of the year. You're going to adjust it as needed.
I love this question here. Which children seem to be falling behind the others? We discussed that with those yellow highlighting. Who can I ask for help with these children? Is it time for a blitz? Who can I approach to help me? So we can highlight those kiddos and we can think about times in the day that we can do explicit instruction as a whole group. But what about when we're just pulling 1 or 2 students? I know that it is very difficult to do that, particularly in our younger grades. We need to be everywhere. We need to be in 10 places at once, and we don't always have time to pull these small groups and work explicitly with these students who need so many more doses. So getting creative. We talked about maybe joining up with a teacher, some of you taking and doing a read aloud or shared reading in one room, another taking some small groups and doing some blitzes. But often we need more than that. So we use big buddies. We train them in our blitzing. So we train them to do specific activities that are really fast paced and intentional. Usually in those kind of blitz times, they only have a few skills. So they may only have 3 letters that they're working on, or they may only have 3 sight words or whatever the skills that you're working on. It's very intentional, very small, very fast.
We've talked a lot today about parent involvement, bringing in parent volunteers. We have parents that want to be able to help in the classroom. So giving them a game, here's a group, here's a game. Can you go please work on this? And they can do that for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, however long you want that to last. We've had lots of parents come in over the years that have been big helps in helping these students extend their learning.
We've heard so many creative stories, not even just parents of the students in your class, your parent advisory committee. You can reach out to them, the PAC, see if anyone's able to support in that way. We've heard a story actually with a district who has a high school really close by, an elementary school. And as a leadership program, they have some of the high school students come and work and do these blitzing things, which is fantastic because you're building community now, not even just in your school, but in the greater community. And that's really, I think that's really effective as well.
Absolutely.
So getting creative.
Doing the blitz. The blitz is a whole nother session. We could spend a whole day talking about blitzing. In fact, there's another session right now with blitzing for some of the older students by Diane and Christy. But just to start thinking about that, how are we going to get our students that are falling behind caught up? And the blitz is a fantastic intervention for that, and it's designed about that. Jen has a book all about putting on the blitz, which is a fantastic read and gives you some really great ideas as well. But as Chelsea mentioned, creativity. Creativity is your best friend. It's going to look different for every class. It's going to look different for every school, for every situation. So how do we find as much support as we can get? And as teachers, that's just what we do. We find support where we didn't think it existed. And that's how we survive in our classrooms. And again, like I mentioned earlier, I like using the sky's the limit, but it really is. There's no wrong answers in how we can figure out how we can add extra support here.
And the more data you can have, the more evidence you can have, the more support you're going to be able to get, because then you're able to go a little bit higher, going to your admin saying, hey, look, here's the data. This is obvious that we have an issue here and we need support, and not taking that as a personal failure. I know we all have had classes that are stronger or weaker. It's not our failure. If you're thinking about what you can do, you're already a fantastic teacher. So reaching out to support is a great thing to be able to do. And it's definitely not a failure on you if you do need that. So looking here, we have just a few more pieces of this. So which skills did I teach last week? How can I follow up to see how many children have made progress on them? That's great to do. You can do your observations. You can do your interviews with them, doing your small group assessments.
This is where you can also plan a specific assessment schedule if that works for you. Okay, on Monday, I'm going to be pulling these 5 students to do a quick assessment. Tuesday, I've got this. Some teachers prefer to have a schedule that they've created so that they are accountable and following that. Others do it on the fly, and that's totally fine. But if that works for you, then I would say planning a schedule is a great option as well.
We'll just do this question here. So when will I enter my new data in my central data collection tool on a weekly basis? So this really depends on how you're doing your tracking and assessing. So if you're doing it automatically on the app or on your circle charts or on your assessments, then this doesn't matter. You're going to be keeping it on. If you like to walk around with your paper and you're doing your assessments, then you have to think about when you're going to transfer that data into the circle charts or into your assessment binder so that everything's in one place. I find sometimes that that's difficult to do, but if you have time at the end of the day and that's comfortable for you, you can sit down, plunk it in. It really doesn't take very long. All right, and that's the end of our weekly planning tool. So again, that's a lot of information and a lot of things all at once, but we have found it to be really, really powerful. So you have that now, you have access to that. I highly suggest you give it a go, even if it's just a trial. I'm going to come off of here for a second.
As I was going to mention too, if just start with a little part of it,
Mhm.
just get your feet wet, try it out, see what you're comfortable with doing. As you become more comfortable, it's going to evolve as it's going to evolve and become more complex as you want to make it. So,
Mhm.
but just to start by even answering one of those questions
Mhm.
right now, maybe you're just looking at those, trying to make a small group. How am I going to do that this week? Let's go do it, and then the following week you can add another step to it. But it's definitely something that is worth looking into.
Absolutely. I know I don't hit every question every week because it is a lot. My goal is to be able to get to there, but I don't always get there, that's for sure. But things that I would focus on for sure are whole group. What skills do I need to work on explicitly at the carpet? Because that's the time that I know I'm going to be planning for every day. I have my whole group instruction. That's where I can infuse it into the read aloud, the shared reading, the 5-day fluency. So when we pick our weekly poem, we just went through our 5-day fluency with you. If I'm picking that poem, I want to think, okay, well, yes, I've picked this comprehension strategy. That's for the month. So that one's covered. I'm going to be doing that comprehension strategy for sure. I'm going to be doing this fluency strategy. I know by listening to my kiddos, that's something we need to work on. Their pacing really needs work. So I plunk that in. But then when it comes to the foundational skills on that day 2, I want to be really looking at that data. So I can go, okay, you know what? They struggled with the see, the, and can last week. Let's look for a poem that has those words in it. Or if I have a few poems already, what skill can I pick out that goes with the data?
And I'm just looking to, again, at infusing those little tiny doses throughout the day. Okay, looking at the data, my class needs to work on rhyming. As we're transitioning to a wash your hands before snack time, I'm going to release students by playing a little rhyming game. Anything you can do to add those little tiny moments throughout your day makes it kind of more engaging for them as well. But in the back of your mind, there's a purpose. There's a reason why you're doing this. There's a reason why you're targeting that skill. For them, it's just a game that you're playing. They don't know any different. But just to kind of keep that in the back of your mind too as you're going through your daily routine.
I love doing a rhyming, even if it's just saying, okay, can we come up, or syllables even, can we clap the syllables for the word buffalo? And getting an individual student to do that, and now go wash your hands. Guess what? Now that hand washing line is not chaos, which is often the case. If there's 1 or 2 kids hand washing, it's a lot better than all 25 or whatever you have in your classroom. If you're able to keep an eye on that and they're able to go get their snack, go to the table, it may take a little bit longer, but the chaos isn't there. There's not water all over the floor, and each individual student just got another dose of the skill, not just when they got called, but they're actually listening to every single other student. So you're able to kind of get those extra doses they're hearing. You can even have them all clapping as they go and keeping them engaged.
My class absolutely loves to play with initial sounds and words. So we'll take their names as we're releasing them, and we're going to work on the letter. We realize we need to work on the letter B. Okay, we're going to change your name to Belsie, to Bathan. Off you go. And they think it's hilarious. They giggle, but they're practicing that initial sound and manipulating words to make new words. Super fun.
So we only have a couple minutes left, and I know it's been a long day. You have done so amazing, short breaks, a lot of information coming to you with all of the different presentations today. But if you do have any questions regarding the app presentation or the weekly planning tool, or the 5-day fluency, anything that we've discussed today. We have about 3 minutes here before we're going to close up and go to the main meeting. So feel free to simply take off your mute and say it out loud or type it in the chat. We'll stick around for the next 3 minutes before we go off. When will the website be available? So the Sprig website or the website with the handouts for Joyful Today? It is available now. You're able to contact Sprig through their Sprig Learning website.
And then just keep in mind, this is an app that has to be purchased. So it'd be something that I would maybe approach your school team, your district, if this is something that you'd be interested in. It does come at a cost to be able to access that app. But do explore their website, and we'll give you a lot of information of how you can do that and some other resources as well.
Yeah, definitely something I would want to be approaching our admin with, our school district, because it's such a powerful tool, but it is so much better if we can go through it with more than one. Absolutely. And then we're able to transfer data through grades as well.
Absolutely.